What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of The 20 Percenters, where we focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. We're sitting here in the beautiful patio of the Brat House in Old Town Scottsdale, and I had the pleasure of sitting down with the founder of the Special Forces Experience, Jeff Depatie. How are you, brother?
I am good. Yourself?
Good. Wonderful, wonderful. Your beautiful bride, Jess, coordinated this whole thing. She's sitting off to the side. You can't see her right now. She's next. And I did a little homework on you online, and you have made the successful transition from active duty military, serving in the Canadian SF, into real estate and entrepreneurship, and you now have an evolutionary process through the Special Forces Experience called The Process, where you take individuals through a period of really deep introspection to harness their mental rigidity. Is that an accurate description of the process?
Yeah, I would like to think of myself as a behavioral architect, someone who creates metaphorical pathways, but in a way that's actually more you finding your pathway.
Okay.
You know, where you're moving through life with the least amount of effort, where it feels, you know, most in harmony, the right balance of love and fear and all the balances.
Right. Helping people find their flow.
Yeah. Not flow like the traditional Mackay version of flow.
Yeah.
But just that overall ease of moving through life.
How did you find that path?
Well, it always takes work, right?
Sure, yeah.
You start off young, and you're kind of you're looking for it, and you're going really far left and really far right, and you discover a lot of things that don't work.
Yeah.
You know, you're figuring out transition through adolescence, and then you figure, okay, relationships. Where do I fit into the world in relationships? And then you continue to hone it, right? And the cycle gets a little shorter and shorter all the time. You figure out, no, that doesn't work. I don't need 10 paths to go this way, right? So it gets honed down. I would say some of the tools that back finding these things, all mindfulness techniques are good, but I like to lean on contemplation. I think contemplation is the strongest out of all of them because it's not just about removing or just feeling, it's about doing both and figuring out, okay, what's the next step when it comes to your thoughts, emotions, and motives. Yeah. So I would say that's like a really broad, it seems like a simple word, but it covers a lot, right? Sure. Because it covers, physical fitness, health and nutrition, everything that makes up your lower pyramid of your physiological needs, and then, your security needs, and all those things. If you travel up Maslow's hierarchy, it can help you find those things. And as you find them more and more, your cycle gets, smaller, and it just seems like you start to I'm on this path. And luckily for me, all my skills, where my culture and my DNA meet up, led me into this portion of my journey. And it just happens that I would never say I have the way. Yeah. And I would never tell you what your way is. Okay. But we have a program where you can find it. That's the backbone of it.
What are some of the instruments that you found efficacious in your journey that you've implemented in the process?
Well, I guess I'll hit back on some of the things I hit, but there's all kinds of views, right? There's very esoteric algorithms like religions and stuff that tell you how to get there, and psychology, the positive psychology movement. Everybody's got a thought there, right? I think you have to build up your base. A lot of people start with things like morning routine and all this, but people who are in the physical fitness space, I think, find it really well because they start training their body. Yep. And then they're like, okay, well, there's nutrition. Okay. Oh, well, now there's my mental game I got to improve. So you naturally fall upon this, and then you just usually fall into a place you love, which sometimes, and in your case, brings in business, and it does all these things, right? But about building up that base. Yeah. Again, there's so many ways, like, fast, slow muscle twitches. Yep. Everybody's got their own thing. So again, it wouldn't be about telling you how to do that. For me, it's about introspection. It's about looking at your childhood, your coping mechanisms. Yeah. What are probably your terrible coping mechanisms that you come out, you know what I mean? Sure. Like, just that's the nature of the beast, because then the fully functioning man, he unplugs all those and he puts in, better behaviors, absolutely. Yeah. And then I would be lying if there isn't some kind of universe or chance or whatever you want to call it. Something's seems to push at you a little bit. You know, if you listen to it, it'll get you in the right place.
Yeah. How'd you find your way into the military? Was that a calling? Because in my experience, a lot of the guys that were in my charge, the guys that I served with, were either chasing a calling or running away from something. Those seem to be in a very high view of things. The two reasons people end up in the military.
Yeah, I'd probably say both.
Okay.
And you know,
okay.
you know, when it comes to truth, it's never cut and dry, right?
Yep.
It was definitely a calling.
Okay.
So I grew up in the northern Canadian wilderness. I was outside, guns, hunting, all that kind of stuff. It was all nurtured in me from the get-go.
Okay.
So, you know, and you nurture it a little bit, you know, okay, yeah, you watch certain shows, you know, you continue to nurture it. So I'd say calling, although it happened at a time where I was probably still running from some things too, you know, like I was a little bit older. I was 25 by the time I got in.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. So I was still able to sort some stuff out, but there was still some stuff pushing, you know, that stuff you're moving away from, figuring out all those shadowy spots.
I'll cut you off really quick. What's it like to be a grown man coming into the military with a bunch of kids, right, like 18, 19-year-olds right out of high school? You already have a little life experience. You've seen what's out there a little bit. And then the naivete of somebody who's still wet behind the ears. How was that dynamic for you?
So obviously, most of your experience is from the Marines, and that is an accurate description, where in the Canadian Forces, it's not like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not everyone's a young green person. Like on my course, like there was a dude, he was 55.
Get out of here.
Yeah, on our basic. So that's basic. The way it works, you go through basic, and then you go into your trade, and then you go through your trade schools, okay? So, you know, definitely not an infantier or something.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But so you're in there, and there's a wide spectrum. I could imagine, though, you know, all these like younger people, like, and full disclosure, at 25, I had a lot of stuff under my belt. You know, 4 years of college, I was a pilot.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of things I did.
Sure.
But I was still pretty young, too.
Okay.
If I'm realistic, I was, you know what I mean? There's a lot of figuring out I had. But I could imagine that being quite the shock, being around all that many young dudes.
Yeah. So at 25, you make the decision, you come on in. And then what's the selection process for SF? You know, comparing apples to oranges, our process versus your process.
Well, yeah, so it is an apples to oranges. You go through you have to do a certain amount of time in the regular military or the reserves.
Yep.
There is no like X-ray program or anything like that where you can direct entry. Not in Canada yet. They should be coming out with something. Cool. Then you go through all the kind of psych testing. So, you know, you're saying about life experience and stuff when you were doing your recruiting trip. I'm sure you had something where if you went to school this long, there were some points. And then if you did this, there were some points. And if you had to face this, there were some points. And you add that up along with other things, you know, recommendations, all that. And then they say, okay, yeah, you can give it a shot. Okay. This first bit's actually quite effective at trimming away people. You know what I mean? Instead of having... we don't have the capacity to run the like 2,500 people a year like a Buds or something like that.
Weed them out.
Yeah,
we get there.
We just don't have that kind of capacity. So we got to start on a smaller scale, and then you go through what I would call a very psychologically demanding challenge. And what it is it uses something called undirected data mining, where they're looking for certain things to add up. Okay. Based on character traits. So everything you face has to add up to these points, add up. Okay. And it's a little different because we don't want to find the same guy. Sure. You want a group of individuals, you know, a team of individuals. So some guys are stronger in certain things, some guys are stronger in other things. You know, obviously all the stuff, you got to be physically fit, you got to be emotionally stable, you got to be mentally resilient. But those are, you got to be that, and then you go, and then you see, okay, well, are you this, are you this, are you this, are you this? It's not as long as some of them. Yeah. It's 7 days. Okay. Okay. But then you go on to what's called your assaulters course, and it's 10 months. Okay. And it's the same thing, except it has one just really nice, nasty, I guess, caveat that through every module, no matter what, they shave the bottom. They shave the bottom. So you go through these different modules. It doesn't matter. So if you're
if you make it,
even if you meet like a certain standard, there's the standard of if you're on the bottom, gone. On the bottom, gone. So
I love that.
And then, the saying, selection never stops, right?
Right.
You get into your unit and you're always under the gun. Yep. You're there to perform. And if you don't perform, it makes sense. You're gone.
Yeah, you're always under observation. So when you're helping people through their process, what are some of the most common reasons somebody self-selects to come see you?
Okay.
To experience the process.
So when we're doing our marketing, we basically say man. So there's a big pool.
Yep.
And then a little bit of an age bracket, somewhere around 18-ish up to about 55. Because I think that after 55, body's going to probably break.
Okay.
And I get it. There's probably going to be a 56-year-old who's going to, I got this,
Right.
And then what happens is through all our interviews, we make sure they meet certain criteria.
Okay.
We make sure that they will get something out of it.
Okay.
Something that, like, we can hand on our heart, be like, yes, that will be a deliverable that you will experience.
Yes.
Or no, this isn't for you. This isn't about coming out and being John J. Rambo in the bush or anything like that. This is about growth.
Right.
Then we look at, the spectrum of man. It would be, I think it'd be a little boring maybe if we only had 35-year-old men who made $150,000 and, we want that perspective.
Sure.
So all this to say, an 18-year-old man shows up with very different needs, wants, and desires.
Yes.
His brain has not crystallized like a 50-year-old, the life experience, the hormone levels are all different. So they all come in with their own unique challenges and gifts as well.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it's interesting watching the older guys learn from the younger guys, you know what I mean? Because it's becoming their world,
Right. Yeah.
And the younger guys through osmosis just soaking up what all the old guys got to offer. But if I was to like pinpoint a few to give you some specifics instead of just talking around it, let's think about this. We talked about young guys really bouncing around that path, really looking for it.
Yep.
But they know there's some tricks, they know, what? There's some algorithms, there's some truths out there that I could live by,
right?
Through mentorship or, I'm sure lots of it would just come through good parenting.
Yeah.
But a lot of people aren't getting good parenting, so they're looking elsewhere.
Okay.
The older guys, they're usually close to figuring it all out. Some of them it's maybe they just understand the power of, we talked about post-traumatic growth, where you put yourself in a challenging adversarial, like a situation that has a lot of adversary to it.
Yep. You
usually come out on the other end stronger. Statistically you do. Like,
right.
If you don't, the other side of it, PTSD, that's much lower, way, way lower. And there's a whole bunch of science that we know can prevent that path.
Well, and, what nobody's talking about, as we alluded to before we got on the mic, was there's so much focus on PTSD and almost nobody's talking about post-traumatic growth. And if you look at us as veterans as a whole, there's way more of us that come out of the military experience, specifically OEF, OIF, with really magnificent tools as a result of that experience, so that we're able to go forth and do productive and great things, than the guys that are unfortunately having a really hard time out here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that that the process is committed and devoted to this bigger picture of post-traumatic growth, becoming anti-fragile, becoming mentally resilient as a result of going through some intentionally hard shit. I've had people ask me recently, the Marine Corps just celebrated our 244th birthday, so my social media has just been blowing up with remember this, remember that, and crazy stories and all these wild nicknames of these unicorns that nobody's ever met before, and like, who's that guy, and blah blah blah. And the way I describe those relationships as a result of that experience, and having seen each other what I call emotionally naked in a controlled but environment that is chaotic and just chock full of adversity, there are things that I don't have to discover about you because I already know. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes that relationship so rock solid.
Yeah. There's so many factors to it, right?
Yeah.
It's such I love this topic. That brotherhood, that bond, but that built-in support network that a lot of people might look at from the outside as a little bit irreverent or whatever. You go through something hard and then you're smoking and joking, but it's like this own really beautiful support system that really keeps that machine nice and oiled. You know, if you didn't have those things, that's when things would start getting squeaky. And then the stuff that happens in the brain when you suffer together, when you go through hard things as a team.
Yeah.
Oh, the bonds that can build. And like you said, the things it tells you about that person, you're like, you know what? I know he's got this trait, this trait, this trait, this trait, just because he made it through basic. And then if he goes a little more, a little deeper, oh, he's made it through a combat tour. I know these things about him, you know what I mean? And obviously with people, it's never 100% written in stone, but you can definitely extrapolate a lot from the experiences that bring. There's no education on it on earth like it. That's I speak to a lot of young men looking into the military, you know, and it's hard to say don't do it on one hand because you can't do that anywhere else.
Sure.
No other job that you go and hunt people.
Right.
You know, you could cop is kind of close, but really you're always a cop. You know, like so to say no straight up is always a challenge, although it's not the perfect thing either. You know what I mean?
Well, I had a kid come in to the gym not too long ago. Just finished his collegiate baseball career, and he's like, I'm talking to the officer recruiter. I want to be a ranger in the Army. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And it's interesting talking to people who want to pursue something great, but they still don't really understand how great what they want to pursue actually is. Because knowing what I know about the recruiting process now, having been a recruiter myself, the preconceived notions people have about the military experience, specifically any and all things special forces, nothing's guaranteed. So the question you have to ask is, are you okay doing the deal if you don't get selected, if you don't make it? Because that's also very real.
And statistically more likely.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. The SFE, we've redefined a few things, and one of them is purpose.
Okay.
So purpose, you know, everyone has a version of what purpose is. For us, purpose is the same for you. It's the same for me. To be the most high vibrational self, your version of yourself, in tune with your identity as much as you can, because it's obviously changing all the time. Then you look at life's work, what you want to do for the greater good outwardly. And lots of times includes employment, you know? Right. So you have a lot of these guys, they come in, they have no identity. They don't know who they are. They're like, I want to go this way because it looks shiny. They start going that way, and then they end up, you know, cleaning latrines versus being a tier 1 operator, or they get through on the other end, and they stop, and they're like, wait a minute, this wasn't my route. Yeah. I've just spent 7 years doing something I shouldn't have did just because I thought if I just force my way that way, I'm on the good path, you know? And that's kind of circling back to the PTSD, like obviously the big issue comes from veterans. That's where the divide is, and it seems like they don't have the ability to find their identity. Not everybody, obviously. 2 examples right here that you can do it, and most people do. But that's, I think, where that struggle is for them. And I think identity is tough for a lot of people because we talked about, you know, childhood. You don't come out of it with all the tools all the time. You know, mom and dad are working 2 jobs, you know, where they should be hanging out with you, showing you by example how to be a man or a woman, you know? Yeah.
I was featured in a documentary called Beyond the Game, and the whole premise of the movie is the successful side after professional athletics. I have no professional athlete experience whatsoever outside of coaching a handful here and there. But I got selected to be interviewed because I was just having a conversation about the identity, the loss of tribe, all the things that are catalysts for either further seeking or just outright failure. And how that same dynamic that they're exploring in this documentary via professional athletics also exists in the military. So they interviewed me to kind of connect those dots. But what's really interesting is this whole concept of mastermind and community. When you leave the uniform and you're seeking a new community, a new tribe, people that operate on your frequency, you're already in rarefied air based on your experience as a veteran, as an operator. So it's really challenging at a base level to find people that speak your language, right? Then you have this really interesting thing that happened called CrossFit. And there's a lot of veterans in our community like, oh shit, my tribe. And what they're experiencing is, oh, I'm surrounded by a bunch of people doing some really hard shit, and then we now have something to talk about. We now resonate on the same level, right? And then you have this next level, right? Programs like The Process, the Special Forces Experience, where you're, again, one of the select few that make it in and make it through. And now you have this even tighter network, this inner circle of individuals who have a shared experience of trials and tribulations that have successfully made it to the other side. And now you have this semblance of tribe again. And I think that's where we've kind of just lost it in the day and age that we're in right now, where we've never been more connected and yet so isolated ever before in human history.
Yeah, how can you be so anonymous when there's so many people around? It does get confusing. But that's we have an equation: personality plus environment equals behavior. And a lot of people don't understand when they're searching for their identity how easy it is to plug in environment. Take the CrossFit military example. Okay, well, I'm a military guy. I like challenge. I like to exercise. Okay, where do I look? CrossFit's got great community, I'll plug myself into that environment, and then the behaviors will start to change from that.
Right.
There's millions of years of programming of us and them, and finding places where you can relate without that trying to figure out, okay, well, what's he about, what's she about, it's just like you're saying, how I just know a few things about them,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's weird how there's this dependability that can be, even though you'll never lean on, I shouldn't say never, most likely not lean on them for the real dire.
Sure.
It's just kind of, it's good to surround yourself with that smaller tribe size.
I'll give you a perfect example of something very innocuous that nobody would think of, issues in transition or markers of PTSD, right? Or this lack of identity, this lack of tribe. So where we come from, right, there's you got your buddies, and you need a ride to the airport. Hey, man, like, I've never considered calling a taxi or an Uber, right? Never. Like, it's just the way of the world. Hey, man, I'm going TDY. I'm going to see my mom, whatever. Can I get a ride to the airport? Sure, man. Got you. Pick you up. Done. No big deal, right? After I leave active duty, I'm in a whole new circle of people, right? I make a phone call, flying out, and I'm like, hey, I need a ride to the airport. Why don't you just call an Uber?
My pants aren't on.
I'm living by myself at the time, and I'm in my house just losing my shit. I'm just absolutely infuriated, right? And to many people just listening to this conversation, like, why would you get so mad about that? That just seems like such a simple and readily available solution, right?
You lived around integrity,
but that's not
though,
what it's about.
And you experienced the opposite of integrity, people stepping up to the plate. There's something really gutting about it. I don't know. It was something that I had to experience.
Okay.
I left the upper echelons, and I stepped out into this world where most people aren't really driven. They live in a fear-based mindset every day. I was like, how do I fit in here? How do I fit in? And it's not like I spent 15 years in business school. I spent 15 years in counterterrorism. Right. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, there's less jobbies on the other side, So that was part of you mentioned we spoke earlier about catalysts and stuff. That was something that sparked the direction of the SFE, was giving men, high achieving men, a place for that, you know? So these guys go through, there's only 7 guys on earth right now who have passed the course, you know? And they can, hand on their heart, be like, you know what? More people climb Everest every year than get through this. So it gives them that too, you know? It's interesting. The dependability, it's not there when you're used to it.
Sure.
I still get upset when people book an interview. Right on the apply page, it says, go through everything. Make sure this is for you. You know, come in to the interview, because I'm interviewing you, ready to go. And then I'll reach out and an email the day before, you know, personally doing it. Hey, in or out for tomorrow? I'm in. Can't wait. And then get there, and then they don't show up for the call. They don't say, hey, you know what? Something came up, nothing. And every time I'm like, how can you do this? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to say you're wasting my time, because I don't want to make it about me, but it always, I get upset at them. I'm like, what are you doing? You know? And then, I could go down rabbit holes about that, but it really does. It's like, where's the dependability? Like, there's a reason.
No, that's a really good point. And I've never had that pointed out, as I've used that example a handful of times, but it's that immediate feeling of disappointment. It's just like, fuck, you know, and for we hold that dependability in such high esteem. It's like, and I'll just speak for me. It's like, I can never, it's this important. It's like, I can never depend on you for anything. I won't call on you for a favor ever again, you know, and it's so unspoken, you know. I'm so much better about, you know, just addressing it, you know, however big or small it is now. I'm better equipped for that. But back then, like, I just let the relationship die, you know. There's
huge portions of our brains that are, like, the meat is there for social groups. And when that happens, it hits big parts of the brain, you know, like your ACCs and stuff like that. Like, they fire up, and it's just like, it's overwhelming a little bit.
Sure.
Like, you said, that dependability. Well, you know, I'm not going out in the bush, or I'm not bringing you to war, or I'm not bringing you in my fold in business. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, whatever your battle is.
Sure. The how has putting those 7 people? Well, how many people have started the process?
So 37 finished.
Okay.
1 serial so far.
Okay.
We're almost topped up on serial 2 for next May. And that's our.
How has putting men through this process made you a better leader?
So, I spoke of osmosis earlier. When you watch people do extraordinary things, or the opposite of extraordinary, where you see it and you're like, no, that is not the way. You know, just seeing it, you know, learning from their hard lessons learned. Sure. Because there's a lot of interpersonal dynamic that starts to happen. Throughout this. It's an individual journey, and then obviously nobody's alone on this planet, so we put them into a lot of team stuff and figure out those things. Watching them, just watching them, I soak up all kinds of stuff. I learn more humility all the time. And when it comes to truth, any argument of truth, you know, getting to see swaths and perspective of people performing at these levels and drawing out that, just to hone my truth in a little bit more, you know, to understand it, to understand the range of it, because it's one of those things you start to learn more about, and then you realize that it's bigger than you can imagine. You know what I mean? It's so complicated. There's been a lot of, like, other kind of side things, you know, learning more about business and that kind of stuff, like just pure business world stuff that I don't really go too much into. It's more of a byproduct of all the things that I love doing. Right. I patience, you know, all of them. Every little bit of me gets honed, watching, doing, learning. And then I get the privilege of sitting down with all their files and then looking at it all. Sure. And then almost every time, if you see something that's a little negative, you could be like, you could see yourself in it. You know, you're like, you know what, I do that a little.
That projection.
Yeah, you know, I could hone that. I could hone that. Or, wow, he does this really well. Yeah. I'm gonna.
That's always interesting when you sit in that position of leadership or coaching or whatever, when you have a student or an athlete or a client or a mentee, an apprentice, and they have like that outstanding quality that is a chink in your armor, and you're like, there's always that. I come at it from a position of pride where I'm like, I know that I'm working with the right person when they have that. I'm helping them build all these other things, but they have that one thing that, because of who they are, makes me better.
It's best to double up, right? Mm-hmm. You're in the coaching position, you're helping them, but they should be elevating you.
Absolutely.
That's how it, there's always a nug. Mm-hmm. You know, you talk to the weirdo homeless guy who's like, blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, okay, there's a deep grain of truth in that. I didn't have to become homeless to learn that, so that's really great. You know?
Yeah, right. Do you think that there's a point in life where it's too late's not the right word? The experience of the process doesn't serve you in terms of how fucking hard it is, right? Because there's this thing that I call the dark place that you've experienced, I've experienced, where you become broken, right? You become disassociated with who you were prior to this experience, and now you have to build all that shit back up and into a hopefully better person than the one that was broken. Do you think there's a point in life where like that discovery, because it sucks so bad, that discovery doesn't serve you?
So yeah, we call it stemming your stream of consciousness. Okay. So when you show up, we'll purposefully drain you of your hormones and neuropeptides, all your regulating functions. Yeah. So that's really what's left is the raw meat of your brain, and it's working off that. Okay. And that forces
the lizard brain?
Well, we slowly, tire the prefrontal. You can't shut it off, but that's the idea is you get more into the realms of your true natures. Mm-hmm. I think that can always serve you. Okay. It just depends on how it shows up, Sure. What is it? The root of self-transcendence is suffering, but, sure. the root of suffering is suffering. So at what point is it like, okay, no more needed? Mm-hmm. I would say, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around here a little, but it's just sometimes it's about climbing the mountain, and sometimes it's about not climbing the mountain and realizing that you can get just as much without doing it, right?
Yep.
And so in a short nug, yes. But I don't think you should – there's no one who's got it perfectly figured out, so you should be cycling through these like I think the Buddha said, self-transcendent is the key to happiness. Mm-hmm. Constantly overcoming yourself, living not without fear, because I disagree with that. I think following your fear is some of the best advice you can do. Absolutely. You know what I mean? It tells you, hey, you know what? Approach with caution, right?
Yeah.
However, there's probably a point where, and that's why we say about the 55, because guys have lost a lot of their tests, and it's not that they don't have the same kind of drive. It's just their body's not going to be able to recoup all the losses as it goes. It'll hurt itself probably too much, sure. and it varies, right? Like some guys are going to be way better at it. Yeah. So I say no. You should cycle.
Okay.
Physical pursuit just to destroy your body, definitely no.
Okay.
Definitely no.
I had a...
yeah, we got there.
Yeah. No. I mean, because I had a guy killing it in business, mid-40s, really athletic, great shape, big house, wasn't hurting for nothing, beautiful kids, the whole thing, right? He's like, I'm going to go do the Kokoro. And I was like, you don't have to, man. Like, don't do it. Like, you don't need to, like, you don't need to discover that dark place. Like, there's other ways that you can do it. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, he goes out there and he fucks himself up early. And it's not the fact that he hurt himself that's the bad part, but he hurt himself early enough that he never got to discover the dark place because he was physically unable to push himself to that point, right? That's kind of the root of the question. Yeah. So is there where does the transformation typically occur? During or in the aftermath?
So we mentioned post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. So the way the process works is 4 phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to build is your own algorithm, okay? So phase 2 teaches you how to prepare. You know, the military has been doing this forever. You want to be in battle, you sweat in training, right? Whatever that training is. Usually it's physical, but mental, it's psychological, self-development, okay? So what we try to do, or what we do, is we deliver the tools in phase 2 after we've picked them to show them how to audit their lives, how to get introspective, how to contemplate, all the mindfulness stuff, because some guys have it, some guys don't. Sure. It's always good to revisit.
Right, absolutely.
Then we put you through the stressor, you know, the second part of the formula.
Okay.
Then afterwards, you move into what's called the trials phase, phase 4. So transitioning from phase 2 to phase 4, there's a decompression. You're familiar with this term, right? From the military, you go on tour, you come home, you go through a decompression before they release you on your family. And it's to help that psychological rigidity, right? Your amygdala has been firing for months, and now it just needs to calm down a bit. You got to, you know, make sure you're not introducing yourself to, you know, hedonic endeavors like drinking and drugs, because that'll just compound it. So it gives you the tools, right? And then I think the real ROI is done in phase 4, where you're like, okay, I knocked on that door, that black door, you know, I opened it up and I punched the dragon in the face. You know, I did that portion. So what did I see there? Okay, now I need to know how to psychologically and physiologically self-coach and program myself to adapt this behavior and change, right? And the idea is that they can cycle through the post-traumatic growth cycle, and then this smaller, tighter one, the trials portion. It's 12 weeks. I won't get into the details of what it is.
Don't give away the secret sauce.
And so that's kind of how we do it.
Okay. Is there... It sounds like this is one of those, there's like requisite literature that comes with this. And if there isn't, what are some of the empowering books that would kind of facilitate this mindset that you've read?
Well, first, during their interview, their reading lists are asked.
Oh, right on.
So whether it's through audiobook or end podcasts, whatever they get their content from, right? If they tell me that they're getting their content from, I won't say something, but
TMZ.
You know, it'll start to tell me about their mindset. You know, if they're like, I need that as my release, whatever. But then you start really digging into what they, you know, the high-end fiction books that are just loaded with allegory and metaphor, you know, and parables, and you know, the cutting-edge psychological self-help, self-development stuff that's there. Is
there anything that shows up on those lists all the time?
Yeah. The Bible, interesting enough, and not from a Christian standpoint, but again from the
storytelling,
the metaphor, the deep lessons that humanity continues to struggle through. You know, the balance is good and evil, and love and fear, and all of them. Right, that's all in there. So they realize they've moved to the point of like, okay, this is from before, but it's got a lot of good stuff. You know, what is his name? Jordan Peterson. He comes in. You get lots of Tim Ferriss guys. It's just whatever they can find that seems to be on that cutting edge. They're looking for those tools, right? That's kind of one of the things we tried to adapt, was not telling them what the tools are.
Right.
How do you live in your own natural cycles and rhythms? You know, what's best for you? There's a lot of the younger guys, like a lot of the Mark Devines and the Jockos and stuff like that. You know, they're looking to be into the military. They're looking at that stuff. Yeah, and the older guys, you start getting into like things like Ishmael and in that realm, you know what I mean? You get to a certain point where speaking in myth is almost more educational, a little more fun, and a little more engaging, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially like, how many times can you be told to think positively?
Right.
You know, even though it's huge, right? Creates the words we use create that neurological map of our reality, and it is so important that we use good talk.
Totally.
Opportunity, not crisis, you know. Good, okay, a challenge, you know, all that kind of stuff. It is important.
Not failure. Yeah.
You know, but okay, well, what else? What else do we got? You know, and maybe it's not that complicated, but
right.
Could be.
You know, I just find it extremely interesting as, you know, we move along this journey, the evolution can't stop. you know, when you feel like, if you ever feel like you've arrived or you've hit the finish line, it's when you kind of, I feel like you start to die a little bit. And, you know, if you've got, you know, monumental goals and you achieve them, well then maybe it's not about setting more goals, but turning around, reaching back and helping somebody achieve theirs, right? There's also growth in that. And, you know, in my journey as a coach and working with some really well-off individuals, the ones that were struggling, hollow and empty, you know, where like the bank account kept growing, but everything else was falling apart. Like they didn't have that peace, right? They kept looking up instead of.
Well, you get to that point and then you got to redefine success, right? Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, when you're redefining it, you can look at all the different versions of capital, right? Social capital, all the lists that are out there.
Sure.
But you're absolutely right. It's probably going to be in service to the collective. You know, how can I make the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people for the greatest amount of time in my own way? Because it might be one-on-one. You know what I mean? You might take one child, mentor him for a few years, and through the butterfly effect, he's the guy who could save the world. You know what I mean? Like, it may not be that grandiose, but his kids might be better. You know, that's how it works. And yeah, there's probably a certain responsibility at a time to move away from yourself so much. I think I don't love generalizing as much because I think some people can actually make a great impact just working on themselves.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's how their impact's going to be made.
Sure.
Some other people, like you were saying, one-on-one, some people in a group, and some people in massive groups, you know?
Right.
And, you know, find that for yourself.
Sure.
I don't know where you look that up on Google, but, you know, it's in there somewhere.
Sure. Where can everybody go and support you, the Special Forces experience?
So
where can they find you?
Best place to start is the specialforcesexperience.com.
Okay.
And then find yourself, you know, going down the rabbit hole. It's all designed to be very contemplative.
Okay.
So people find themselves visiting it and coming back and visiting because it resonates.
Sure.
We made it, not with cheap psychological gimmicks, but we made it for men. We researched men. We researched the holes in their lives and where there's not holes. And we researched what makes them tick, you know, what makes a man in different places. And we put this together for them.
Sure.
So it's going to resonate. Yeah.
Okay.
Head down that way.
Cool. So check out the specialforcesexperience.com. Support everything that Jeff has going on. And if you're looking to explore the process, be sure to join us at the New Year Network, December 28th, 29th, and 30th here in Phoenix, Arizona. And we can help you dive a little bit deeper through our deep work process. And if you haven't read Inner Circle, go ahead and pick that up on Amazon. Appreciate your time today, brother. Thank you for being here. And glad to have you in the neighborhood. You guys are like within arm's reach now, so we'll have to hang out.
Closer to the inner circle.
That's it. Welcome, bro.
Thank you.
For sure. Until next time, guys, make sure you focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. And we'll see you next week.